Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we're talking to legendary A&R and executive producer Orlando Mcghee, discussing his impact on the crunk and hyphy eras, breaking boundaries in music and influencing the culture, and executively producing the Art of Organized Noise documentary. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and I'm sitting here with legendary A&R and manager Orlando Mcghee.
Hello.
How you feeling?
Great. So glad to be here.
Good to have you. For people that don't know you, we kind of spoke off the record a little bit about the fact that I couldn't find anything on you. It was tough. You have your credits listed, but I didn't even know where you were from. Are you from the city?
Well, I was born in Warrenton, Georgia, which is maybe 45 minutes outside of Augusta. When I was a baby, my mother moved to Vineland, New Jersey, lived there till I was 13 years old, and then moved to Atlanta from there.
So you did spend a great deal of time here in the city, so you grew up here.
Yes.
We'll say. You've also been a part of a lot of artists' careers from the South and, well, really all over. As an A&R and both a manager from the likes of like Future.
Future,
talked about
Lil Scrappy, Trillville, Crime Mob, E40, Lil Jon. I mean, the list goes on and on. Gucci Man.
Yeah. And you actually managed Future.
Yes.
That's correct. Okay, so I remember seeing him in college. I wanted to share this story with everyone. I remember seeing him in college, and I'm from here, like I said. So I grew up when he listening to him in high school as he was kind of coming up. So of course I knew who he was, but going to Howard in DC, no one knew who he was. So he performed at like a college celebrity basketball game, and literally it's me and like 3 of my friends from Atlanta, and we're all doing like the Beef It Up dance, getting real hyped to Future, but nobody knew who he was yet. And now seeing him with like #1 records, you got Mask Off, March of Madness, that have been really great records, kind of crossing over into pop and other things. Who were you in the development of his career, and how do you think you helped him get to where he is, if you did?
It was one of the biggest challenges of my career.
Really?
I mean, he's probably the most talented person that I've ever worked with in the studio, but, getting a lot of artists to understand the other side of it, from the business side of it, what we have to do to make a career actually happen, from tours to having a business manager, the backside of things, to kind of relax their mind so they can sit in the studio and just do that work.
Right.
I remember the current agent that he has now, Zach Iser at ICM. Mm-hmm. Man, Zach chased Future for months to get him as a client. And I remember the first time I introduced them to each other, we were in Charlotte, North Carolina at CIAA, and Zach was standing outside the van, and he was about to have security go do something to him, because he thought he was, we were trying to get rid of him because he thought he was a police officer, undercover cop or something, the feds. Jewish white guy, kind of standing around all the time. And he was always where we were. I made it a point to, just tell Zach, come around, get comfortable, make sure he's comfortable with you. In that early era of Southern music, not many artists were doing hard ticket dates. So me and my past relationship with Lil Jon, watching what we did there, transform into becoming, a pop star, kind of gave me the insight in trying to convert Future from a nightclub act into a hard ticket artist.
Tell me what that means to be a hard ticket artist.
Doing venues where you basically pre-sell tickets, the Tabernacles, the Fox Theaters, to an arena tour that he's doing now. No, not necessarily arena, but an arena tour, I guess. So you have to develop into that type of an act.
Right.
So, Southern artists at that time, everybody was in a nightclub. You can go pick up $100,000 in a nightclub in a heartbeat and walk away and be good, as opposed to actually putting on a huge production. The nightclub circuit works probably from Thursday to Sunday, but on a hard ticket date, you can go across the country Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And getting an artist to understand, hey, being gone on a tour bus every day for 3 months. But when you come home, that's when you buy your house. That's when you buy the cars.
That's true.
And so on and so forth, because you're making $1 million. I mean, a couple of $1 million on that tour.
Yeah, a lot has changed since seeing him in Bird Gymnasium at Howard University to seeing him at Lakewood with Fire and Flames coming up. The production is definitely different.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'd like to know, I guess, early on in your career, how you even got into A&R and management in the first place. What was like the first thing where you're like, I know this is what I'm going to do for a while?
Man, it's funny. A friend of mine named Marcellus Lewis,
okay,
in high school, decided he wanted to start a rap group.
Really?
So for one day, I was a member of that rap group.
Oh, you were in the group.
And
what was the name of the group?
Oh man, Creative Chaos.
Oh, right.
And we were huge fans of Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
And, man, all of the DITC crew, real hardcore backpack hip hop. We were big fans of that. I did one song, one verse. We paid for the studio time.
Nice.
And I realized I wasn't that good. But I loved music. I played in a band in high school.
Really, me too. What'd you play?
I was a drummer.
Nice.
Snare drummer. So from that point, I decided that I wanted to have something to do with music, but didn't know what. I had a part-time job at Blockbuster Video, so they started selling music in the store, and I designated myself as the music manager. So I would order. The manager of the store basically gave me the order sheet. I would order all the music, and the sales of the music quadrupled from the music that I ordered, and it gave me a career at Blockbuster Video. A lot of people, local people from Atlanta, remember me. I ended up being the store manager at the Blockbuster Entertainment, as we called it, on the corner of Stewart and Cleveland Avenue.
Oh, wow.
So that's one of the
throwbacks.
Hoods in Atlanta. And that store is synonymous with Atlanta because so many different things happen in that particular location. So, kind of went from there and, met a couple of people here and there throughout my career and decided to apply for an internship at Organized Noise. Now, I had a choice of LaFace and Organized Noise. Okay. LaFace was so big and there were so many people, that were interns there. At Organized, it was more of a, boutique shop and boutique label. So I figured I'd have a better shot at, getting to Rico and Ray and Sleepy and, meeting them and making a great impression.
Right.
And, I mean, it was actually true.
Yeah.
I started out working in the office as an intern, got to a point to where met Dee Dee Hibbler. I love her to death. She gave me a key to the office as an intern.
Oh, wow.
And I would go to my job during the day. I would get off about 4 o'clock. I'd go straight to the office, which, they were doing a lot of business on the West Coast. So I still had that 3-hour time slot to actually learn and get work done. I would answer phones. I'd file paperwork. But one thing that she did do, as opposed to just having me file the agreements and contracts, she sat me down and explained to me what was in the deals.
Nice.
So, I mean, I owe her a debt of gratitude for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the people that, really help you learn. Those are the good internships.
Definitely.
So you actually early on developed those relationships with people who were in the music industry doing some huge things.
Definitely.
Like Rico, I know that you all have a good relationship to this day.
That's my brother to this day.
Yeah.
It's funny because one day at the office, they sent me to his house to go deliver a package. And I always told myself, because he would come to the office every now and then. He may be able to come to the office twice in a year's time.
Wow.
And that one time I had a chance to go by the house and deliver a package, I never left. He called the office and said, "Hey, this is my intern now," basically. So I was at the house every day from that point. And that's where all the artists came, all the managers were there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much business done from his house that, it was ridiculous. And my career got started there.
Wow.
And
at
the
Rico
relationships
Wade's
I built. Rico Wade's house as a dungeon on Adams Drive.
Nice. So I guess why management? Because I hear a lot of people say that managing is like glorified Babysitting, yeah. And, you know, I've actually been asked a few times myself, and I personally want to know why management for you. Why did you think that that was a good space for you?
Well, being at the companies that I was at beforehand, I always wanted to work for a record label. So
Right.
the relationships and the time that I spent at the dungeon figuring out how to mix music, how to master music, what it should sound like. Those are the greatest guys at sonically putting together music.
Yeah.
From there, I went and worked for Little John.
Okay.
And, you know, we spearheaded the careers of, you know, so many artists there. And I got a chance to figure out every aspect of it because working in a boutique system, you have to do everything. There is no department where you do A&R. There is no department where you do product management and marketing and radio. So I learned every aspect of it. I was a tour manager at one point at B&B for Scrappy and Trailville while we were out on the road.
Really?
I mean, I did mix show. I had a mix show list. I did A&R. I was product manager. So every aspect of an artist's career, I got a chance to participate in to the point to where Naeem Ali caught my, my name caught the attention of Naeem Ali from what I was doing. He mentioned it to Tom Wiley, who's the chairman of Warner Brothers, and they offered me a job.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm a real loyal guy. It took me a year almost to leave BME and take that job at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So when I did, though, you know, we had a lot of success, and it was one of the best decisions I'd made at the time. They let me live in Atlanta. I had to move back, and you know, it was a lot of travel back and forth, but you know, so much going on in Atlanta. They let me stay here and do
New
what
York?
I did. To LA.
LA. Okay. BME, for clarification, though, is Lil Jon, Cersei, and
Rob McDowell and Vince Phillips.
Vince Phillips, yeah. That was their record, or it is their record company. To get into that, though, in particular, because I'm from here, like I said, I remember the crunk era. I kind of grew up in that time. It was a different time in the early thousands with music. It transcended the South. I read something, actually, that was published maybe a year or so ago about your influence of culture with hyphy music.
Gotcha.
West Coast, the E40 days. Anthony's over here getting crunk. How did you introduce this unfamiliar wave of music? I think that's what makes your career what am I trying to say? It makes your career so impactful because you were introducing people to certain cultures, right?
Yes. Actually, you know, it's funny because I talked to a lot of people about that. Like, you know, now people are referencing culture in hip hop.
Right.
But that was one of the things that I learned from Rico and Little John was, you know, when you put together projects, you influence so much more when it's ingrained in the culture of the music.
Right.
You know, music is an emotion. So, you know, you play into those emotions of the people at the time.
Yeah.
And what, you know, Organized Noise did at the time when they were, you know, putting together music was needed. What crunk music did was so fun and free and
a lot of energy.
Yeah, the energy was incredible. So we played on an era of, you know, what Atlanta was at the time.
Right.
So, and brought it to the forefront. And we never chased after pop success and whatnot. It always came to us.
Right,
you know,
right.
John ruled the charts for years with crunk music, and we never once chased after it. You know, we were who we were. He was who he was. All the artists, it was all genuine.
Nice.
So that was the greatest feeling in the world was, you know, watching it transcend, you know, to 50,000 people at a concert, you know, singing this song. We were like, wow. And, you know, half black, half white. And we were trying to figure out where these white kids figuring out where are they discovering this music from?
Right.
So
that's cool. That's cool to see. That's cool to watch.
So I can't take credit for hyphy music.
No. And I even read too that E40 can't necessarily take credit for the hyphy music either. But you were a part of
bringing it to the forefront.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
That's the main thing. My question is, how did you do that? Like, what were the strategies that you used to bring it to the forefront?
Well, we used, there was a DVD that BME was synonymous with visuals.
Yeah.
Even before the era of, you know, music video. At the time, several people had VCRs, or not even VCRs, what DVD players in their cars.
Oh, yeah.
So what we did, there was a movement going on in the Bay Area with hyphy all together with the cars. Like it was just complete culture. So we grabbed footage of the sideshows and the dances and whatnot. We put it all on a DVD and sent it out, to all the DJs across the country, to all the program directors across the country, to kind of introduce it, to let people know this is something that's happening. And, it kind of exploded from there. I remember a couple of radio stations telling us, Tell Me When to Go was not a hit record, because they were like, who cares about the Bay?
Right.
But each time they would go to a club, they couldn't deny what was happening. Right. And it kind of just exploded from there. And I remember E40's project before John signed into BME, it wasn't a dud, but it was maybe 100,000 pieces. And at a major record label at that time, that was, mediocre.
Yeah.
The fact that he was gold by the time we finished with him at BME. And, that was a big feat a couple of months before that. So, and we put out a DVD and actually sold it, which the hype on hyphy.
Right.
So we sold the culture of it, to kind of explain what was going on in the music.
Was it like a documentary? Yes. Yeah. So it seems as if you also seem to figure out branding early on. Why is branding an important part of developing an artist and, creating that success for an artist?
Well, I'll say it actually helps on the marketing side because you're spending someone else's money, for one.
True.
With before the streams started to count towards the record sales and the formula for the payouts were figured out, the hip hop music as a whole diminished the sales of it. So we had to figure out a way to subsidize those budgets when we go into marketing meetings at different record labels. I remember, trying to figure out in the early days of Future how we were going to, go to LA and ask for X amount of dollars to do certain things. Yeah. So I remember one of the first tours he did, we brought in Puma as a sponsor. I mean, the Reebok deal he is in now, that was, a deal we had on the table way back when. I mean,
really?
Yeah. Some of the music videos we had, Apple Music pay for, cover some of the cost of one of the music videos. Same thing with John. We would always find innovative ways to kind of involve brands and whatnot. John was actually one of the key elements of showing me how to actually maneuver that with Crunk Energy Drink. And,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had to deal with Oakley sunglasses.
Nice.
And so on and so forth. So, it was always, don't sell out to the brand, bring the brand into what your culture is.
Right.
And find a, interesting and innovative way to present it out to the public.
What do you recommend in terms of artists? I mean, of course, the artist has to have a certain following and, create a brand for themselves. But are you reaching out to the brands that you like, or is it like a lot of brands reaching out to you guys?
Well, it actually works on both spectrums. Some companies actually have a marketing department where they go out and search after certain artists. And, there's advertising agencies that put together campaigns. I mean, Steve Stout is one of the best at that. So, but his is more so superstar driven.
Right.
So when you have a developing act, what we do is create a deck, put together their social numbers, and social media made it possible for a lot of this to occur in this era. And early on, when John was doing it, it was a little more difficult because to track the demographic of what audience they were chasing after wasn't an easy task. You actually had to have a mouthpiece to be able to go in and have that conversation and convince that company to be involved with you business wise. So social media made it so much easier now to go out and promote a product, to endorse it, and for that product to be involved in an artist's career. An Instagram post basically, is almost equal to an endorsement now.
It's crazy. It's different. So let's talk about you transitioning into more like corporate with Warner Brothers. You were actually the director, former director of A&R there. What was that process like? Like going from, smaller recording labels and like you said, an in-house boutique with organized noise almost, to Warner Brothers?
It was, man, it was a very eye-opening experience.
Okay.
Going from a boutique system where you just did it.
Yeah.
You know, we'd sit in a room and, you know, watch television or listen to music and be inspired by inspired by something and just write it all down, put it together in a plan and actually go and act it. When you're dealing with a corporate entity like Warner Brothers, man, that first month was almost one of the worst experiences of my life.
Really?
Yeah, because I had to figure out how to do things diplomatically, politically, and within a budget,
Right.
and get approval from so many different areas.
Right.
So it would take, man, a week to get anything done. So by the time, you know, it gets approved, sometimes you don't even want to do it any longer.
Right.
So you know, it took some other, you know, young black execs, because Warner Brothers was really a rock label at the time. I think John was, the BME deal was maybe one of the first urban projects that they brought into Warner Brothers in that new era.
Gotcha.
So, you know, there wasn't really many people in the know of Southern hip hop.
Yeah.
You know, we prided ourselves in what we were doing here. So trying to convince, you know, a 50, 60-year-old guy, you know, what we're trying to do culture-wise here, you know, was difficult. But I will say they kind of took to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were open-minded in a lot of respects, but you did have to learn how to play the political circle of, let me get you on my side, so when we go into this meeting, you don't challenge me. You know, so a lot of the older execs, you know, they did bring me under their wing. I applaud Naeem Ali, Denise Williams, and a couple other people, because they were able to bring me in like, hey, man, you can't just yell at these people all day, every day. You know, you got to be a little more diplomatic with it.
Yeah. You got to play it smart.
Definitely.
So what benefits do you feel like you gained from working in a corporate setting like Warner Brothers to begin with, and then transitioning back into your own, because I know you have 72 Music Group?
Oh, man, the biggest was dealing with the finance department. Man, the profit and loss sheet that no one seems to understand before they get into a record label. You have it's funny, I have a lot of arguments with a lot of young managers now, because they're like, oh, man, these record labels don't know what they're doing, you know, this, that, and the other. I'm like, hey, man, when you walk into that meeting, that's that man's lifeline on, you know, when an A&R decides to sign an act, that's his career on the line.
Right.
When he has to walk into a meeting with the finance department and explain, this is the number, he has to basically guess and bank on, this is the number of units we're going to sell with this particular project. So there's a formula that they put together on what the profit of that project will be and what the loss will be.
Right.
They're not in the business of just giving away the money.
Right.
You know, so that was definitely a learning curve, and taking responsibility for that money being put out there. Because, you know, early on, you're looking at $1 million out the window before anything really, really happens from a major record label standpoint. That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure. And you actually endured some of the pressure. Actually, before you left Warner Brothers, could you tell us about that experience?
Oh, yeah. Man, before I got fired.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
It's a part of the learning process.
One of the most controversial LPs of my career, and probably one of the best times, was, you know, working on The Stage versus Roger Davis.
Yeah.
You know, I was an A&R at Warner Brothers at the time. There was a transition in staff from Tom Wiley to some other individuals. They came in. Gucci was one of the projects that he brought in, being that I was in Atlanta. That project basically came over to me. And I think we put together a really great project. And, you know, a couple of disagreements with some of the bosses there on how things were done. My name was removed from the packaging of the project after it was done.
Yeah,
I was a little upset. If you look, well, you'll see my assistant's name still listed as an A&R coordinator.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, and the rest is history. You know, I wouldn't accept the fact that, you know, 9 months of my life was spent working on a project, and, you know, in a whim, someone decided to remove my name. And normally I'm not a big advocate of credit, because I was going to get my money anyway, my royalty and whatnot. But that one was an interesting project putting together. So, you know, I definitely wanted to get credit for that work. So,
well, you heard it here first. Orlando Mcghee A&R that project with Gucci. I think that's dope, and I think it kind of what you said that you spent about 6 to 9 months developing that project. I want to know, in terms of being the A&R, working with the artist, what's your role while the project is being made? What are you responsible for doing?
Well, that one, because, he had really great relationships with a lot of different producers. And at the time, he was, on the cusp of taking off and exploding career-wise. So everyone wanted to work with him, but he wasn't always available because of some legal ramifications. So I had a really great relationship with Fat Boy and a lot of the other producers on the project. So gaining access to all of the records, because he lives in the studio.
Right.
So, man, I think there were 100 plus records that he had, and we were trying to figure out what records to go with, and really find the records was the key. Because he'd go record in studios. He spent a lot of time here. So I'd actually have a relationship with the producers where you haven't paid them for a record yet, but they'll let you come into their studio with your hard drive and pull out files. So we can actually have access, the record label could have access to those records and be able to listen to them.
Right.
When I worked at Warner Brothers, one of the things that I tried to do was, feed the city, so to speak.
Right.
So, I would use different studios. I'd use a lot of different producers, a lot of different engineers to make sure that I spread the wealth around, that everyone was able to, work. So that's how I was able to actually go and access those files and put together records and, so on and so forth. It was a team effort. There was a lot of other guys involved. But yeah, being able to come in from the side of the project and actually make those things.
What would you say it takes in order to be a successful A&R, in order to pick out certain records? What is it that you have to have as the A&R?
Man, you actually have to value others' opinion, especially an artist. You guys have to be able to be on the same page and understanding. Like, prime example with E40. I really wasn't a huge E40 fan before I started working with him. I had one conversation with him, and it was more so on certain songs, if you could slow down what you're saying, because you're probably, in my book, E40 is one of the top 5 top lyricists of all time. I mean, if you really listen to what he says, it's some of the most incredible shit imaginable. Can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say whatever you
it's some of the most incredible shit you could ever imagine. But, here in the South, it was so fast, we didn't really understand what he was saying. So if you listen to You and That, it was slowed down. You could actually understand what he was saying. And it was, it was a phenomenal record. So same thing with Gucci. It was, kind of trap music taking off to a certain degree. So it's being open. I can't say I'd made any major decisions on any of the records. Mine was more so a relationship with the producers and the other artists of wrangling all that together.
Right.
And just letting it be what it was. I know, people at the record label didn't think Wasted was a hit record.
Yeah.
But Gucci knew.
Yeah.
So that was his call. And that was Fat Boy's call on saying, that record's a hit record, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it turned out to be a hit record.
So what do you look for when you're working with an artist, or when you're deciding? Because you said even like working, especially at a major label or as an A&R, it's kind of like your career's on the line. What would you say you look for when you're working with the artist, even in taking them on as a manager?
Work ethic. Work ethic is a big part of it. A friend of mine, actually a business associate of mine, Jason Brown, and I myself were talking about this the other day. He had an act years ago, and I remember him coming to me one day like, man, I feel like I'm working harder than this artist is.
Yeah, no, that's never good.
I forgot who it was that, was sitting in the room with us and basically told him, you got to let him go then, because there's no way you can work harder than the artist, because if he doesn't want it, it'll never happen.
Right.
So I've actually, had the advantage of being around people that, man, their work ethic is crazy. Being around Organized Noise and Rico, they sit in the studio all day, all night. That's what they do, is make records. They have a love for it. With Future, it's all day. And he, Future got his work ethic from Rico. It was all day, all night in the studio. Gucci was all day, all night in the studio. E40 studio in his home. That's all day, all night. So,
So what's up? You then, after you were leaving, or you were
big release
from Warner Brothers.
My contract, yeah.
Yeah. So you then, or was it then that you went to start your company?
Yes.
72 Music Group. Tell us about what that is and why 72 Music Group. What's the name?
the number is synonymous with my birth year.
Okay.
And I mean, I was still under contract to Warner Brothers. I just
Okay.
signed a new deal. I was 6 months into a new deal there.
Oh.
So basically, they had to pay me out, but I couldn't work anywhere else.
Right.
So, I came up with this idea of starting this company myself, talking to a lot of different guys. They did let me realize management is where the money is. Working at a record label is good, but again, at the time, ringtones had, phased out. Hard disc were still in play, but it was, on the decline. Yeah. So the record industry was in a place where they were trying to figure out their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the middle of that as well. So, one thing that was always for sure was artists were always doing shows. There was always branding opportunities. So I learned so much over the early part of my career that I decided that, hey, let me start this company and see what I can actually do with it. And one of my first clients at the time was Nappy Roots.
Oh, yeah, I did see you had a credit for that.
What I did, they were, kind of moving around. They were kind of languishing a bit. They were in a deal. They had done an independent deal with, I believe, N Grooves, which is an independent distributor. But they didn't necessarily know musically where they were going to go, what they were going to do. So I went to my guys at Organized Noise and said, hey, how about you guys just do a whole project with Nappy Roots? They were like, okay, cool. And that's where nappy.org came from. Right. And subsequent to that, I found a booking agent in Nashville that was booking, trying to figure out what to do with them tour-wise. A guy named Brian Waymeyer, and I had a conversation. And he decided to take him on as a client, but he was doing more country acts. But come to find out, the venues, the blue-collar worker that were fans of Nappy Roots, that was their audience at the time.
Oh, wow.
They really were into them. So I can't say I made the strategic move, but it was more of a lucky move, so to speak, of meeting someone that actually had interest in them. And, they were able to go out on the road and tour and rejuvenate a bit of their career. We licensed records for TV and, whatnot, because they own the masters of those records. They were able to, maintain their career. 40 years old and 4 or 5 guys on the road, they're still, moving and going.
So that's what's up. Yeah. I love that. I think I want to know, was there a particular moment in your career where you realized, like, okay, I'm in the right place. Like, I know this is it.
Working with the affiliates.
Oh, yeah.
When the Super Friends split, Drama, Cannon, and Sense were friends of mine. Mm-hmm. So they came to me like, man, it's not working out for us over here. We still love the guys, but, we want to do some different things. Right. It's like nowadays, you have the older generation, you have the younger generation. So the affiliates were more so the younger guys in the Super Friends crew of DJs. So they were like, you kind of seem to think out of the box. Would you mind managing us? Mm-hmm. I was like, sure. So one of my first thoughts was, and hopefully, I don't get arrested for this, but one of our first thoughts was, hey, Drum, you're selling these mixtapes and you're barely breaking even on it. So how about we take the mixtapes and up the price? And it's funny because once Big Oomp, who's a really good friend of mine, found out that I was working with Drum, he called me like, yo, y'all messing up the game because you're selling these mixtapes so cheaply.
Right.
And I'm like, really? Okay. So, Drum and I had the conversation. We argued about it a little while, and he finally gave in.
I was going through it's funny that you said that. I was going through some old CDs at a station I worked for, and it was like something that the Fader did with them, and like Cornerstone something.
Yeah,
like
Cornerstone.
Yeah, all these like old tapes that seemed, just having physical copies, the mixtape game, that was like a big thing.
Yes, definitely.
That's what's up.
So, I remember waking up one day and we looked at the PayPal account and we're like, oh my booming. God, yeah. Who knew?
Wow.
So,
wow.
That's what I knew. I was like, damn, I'm on this. So I know what I'm doing a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and he said the same thing. Like, wow.
Dope. I love it. And I want to say this because I know you named a few classics that you've worked on, but there's so many. Name a song, artist, or project that you wished you had an opportunity to work on that you didn't over the years.
Man, in all honesty, I'd say the Future Hendrix project. We left on I can't necessarily say on bad terms, but we're friends.
Yeah.
So over time, it heals all. That particular project, I believe in my eyes is something we hatched even before a lot of the other music. He was dealing with some stuff.
Yeah.
He was, in a relationship. He was in love. So, he was transitioning from, the street. He wasn't poor anymore. He was rich. So that's a difficult transition for a lot of guys. So, the edge wasn't there in the music. So on that particular project, he had the edge. I think he found himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was too many songs, but I think he had found himself in the sense that, he knows how to balance the street records and the pop leaning records
Exactly.
now.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
It's great to see his evolution over time.
Absolutely.
So I regret not being a part of that particular project.
Yeah. But very successful.
Yes.
Either way. So I loved it. I do love it, and I love that he said it was a story for how it all came about.
Yes.
And something. Well, give me a classic one. Something that you may not have even been in the industry necessarily yet,
man.
that you would have wanted to work on growing up.
Probably, Southern Playalistic.
Yes.
And because hearing the stories about the recording sessions and how, no one having any money and, just the camaraderie amongst everyone, it exuded so much of Atlanta at the time. I would love to have been a part of that process.
Yeah. That's what's up. So aside from A&R, you actually have a lot of executive producer credits and producer credits for projects outside of music. Especially, you're known a lot for the development of The Art of Organized Noise, which was the documentary that released, a year ago via Netflix. So tell us about creating that and your place in the creation of that.
Well, one of the things you mentioned was building brands. So I felt like a need to give back a bit. Organized Noise had done so much for my career. I think at a certain point, I went to the guys like, hey, do you guys mind if I manage you guys? And it wasn't necessarily a question. I had been doing so a little bit, before that, but I wanted to make it official. I didn't necessarily know how to go about doing so because your mentor is how you go from interning to representing them.
Right.
So, I had different ideas. So one of the ideas was, over a 2-year span, I say a year and a half, I wanted to rebrand everything they were doing. They were still in the studio making records, but a lot of the younger fans didn't know how to get in touch with them. I mean, not fans, but the younger artists didn't know how to get in touch with them. They didn't know whether or not they would work with them, So I said, let me find a way to tell the history of you guys to the new age of, writers and producers and, different artists. So we made a concerted effort to go out to different publications and tell the story. And one day it just hit me like, yo, we're giving the story away for free. Right. So how about we actually take it and tell the story,
right,
but leave room, because usually when you do a documentary, it's the end of someone's career. Yeah. So, but I wanted to leave room for the future of what was going to happen, because a lot of people didn't give them the credit for what is going on in Atlanta.
That's true.
I mean, and honestly speaking, I can't say there wouldn't be an Atlanta scene, but that shit would not be what it is right now if it was not for Rico Wade. He has the greatest heart of anybody imaginable. He fed the city from studios to musicians to other producers, everything. He is the prince, I say the king of Atlanta. And I debate anybody, in reference to it. So he made it cool to be from this city. So I wanted to tell that story, and I wanted other individuals to tell it for him as well.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people didn't know his relationship with Puff, or even the pressures of having to deal with what those guys dealt with success-wise.
Exactly.
Sleepy with Jimmy Brown being his father, and a legendary artist, from Brick, and Ray, and, having created the biggest rap group of all time, and then having to redo that over and over again,
Exactly.
and the pressures of it. So, at 19, 20 years old, I mean, the closest thing to that nowadays is Metro Boomin.
Right.
And, there hasn't been anyone that accomplished that at that age, in this current climate.
That's
I think
true.
most guys are maybe 28, 29 before they have that amount of success. So, to tell that story had to be done correctly.
Exactly.
So we, racked our brains. I went through a couple of directors. The guys were with it. We went to a couple of local guys. We were going to do it with them. But then a while before, Shakim Campier and myself had ran across each other. We were actually looking at doing some film stuff with Future. We were going to do some movies.
Nice.
Like some little street movies.
Yeah.
So my conversation with Shakim was, hey, he actually managed Outkast early on in their career.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, Shakim, you're familiar with the story. You know what, and I mean, you're a legitimate film company.
Right.
I don't know how to make movies. I have no idea. I don't have the first idea of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he put me with a producer from their side, Yanley Artie, and we sat down and, mapped it out. Shakim brought up the idea like, hey, how about we use QD3? He's a producer, so he knows the intricacies of what a song is and how to produce a record, has success in it. And he's a stellar filmmaker. So, it all kind of came together pretty
That's
simple.
what's up. Yeah, no, it's a great documentary.
Yes, thank you.
Great. I've watched it so many times. And it's cool to hear the story. Do you think that now, since releasing the documentary, that it's helped in kind of fulfilled the mission or the goal in mind when creating it?
I think so.
Yeah.
So many people. It was funny. Now Rico's like, man, I can't even walk through the mall anymore without people stopping me and congratulating me and thanking me for what we've done here. I'm like, wow, that's something else. But the biggest thing that got accomplished from there is people know that they're still working.
Yeah.
So a lot of work came from that, and we also used it to. One of the things the guys never took advantage of back then was to sell merch. So we created a website for them. There's a store on there. People, the Outkast 20th anniversary. I mean, the merch blew out of the, we sold out each day. As soon as we could re-up on the orders, we'd sell out that day. So we even put out an album just recently where the guys just took some of their production and put it together. And, we did a little indie deal and put it out. So those things actually helped out, and especially the younger acts, because of a lot of what they're doing, what they did musically has now come back to the forefront.
Yeah.
Record labels don't want to pay for those samples anymore. So, they're bringing in producers with musicians and having them recreate music. And
I'm here for that.
Yeah,
I'm here for it. And you mentioned too, just being able to go back to Organized Noise and say, hey, like, can I manage you guys? I thought that was interesting but it also shows that you have those relationships and you've sustained those relationships over the years throughout what you've done. Why do you think it's important to have not only great relationships, but like a stellar reputation in this business?
Because your reputation precedes you. To have longevity, people have to want to be able to deal with you. I can't say I'm perfect with everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone has their enemies. Everyone has. I mean, recently an A&R rep from a record label told me I was an underdog. Like, man, you're out there on your own. I was like, man, you sold no records yet. How you gonna tell me that?
Right.
Accomplish something first. But
right.
It's the microwave age of everything now. Staying humble. Something I learned from John and Rico. Having those guys around and being able to sit around and talk to them. And, after they're multimillionaires and, they can't walk out of the studio without someone noticing them, but seeing how humble they are and being grounded in family. I'm a big family guy. So,
yeah. I was going to ask too, I was like, you're a dad.
Yes.
Yes. So you certainly seem like you've done a lot in the industry, but you've also, or you spend a lot of hours, like countless hours in the industry is what I want to say, but you also have a good work-life balance.
Definitely.
How do you maintain that, and why is that even important to you?
I mean, I'd say my kids are industry kids. I mean, one thing I will say, it's nothing to see my kids in the studio with me,
Right.
At a concert, backstage, but they understand, I keep them out of trouble, out of harm's way,
Yeah.
but I keep them with me a lot.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, it's great to see a lot of guys do. One thing I give John, he was a family-orientated guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Rico with his kids, and, he's everywhere with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that Future kind of came along with eventually, was being involved in his kids' lives, hugely, taking them out on the road with him.
Yeah.
E40, actually, E40 is probably one of the biggest role models in that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing him with his wife and his kids and how much love they have for each other and watching them travel, it makes it, worthwhile to see that,
Yeah.
and know that it's actually possible.
Exactly.
So I take time out. My son plays, recreation sports in every aspect, and I'm there every day if I can be. I mean, I may miss a game here and there, but it's nothing to jump on a red-eye flight and make it back in that morning in time for a game, or, stop what you're doing. I have meetings at, practice, and tell people, hey, you got to come out here and meet me at this park this time, this day. We'll sit in the car, or we're just standing out there, and that's just, being part. That's one of the free things about being in the music industry. There's no there's no formula
Boundary.
for how you have to do it. Yeah, no boundaries.
Yeah.
So you can actually, if you want to balance it out, you can.
Yeah.
Especially with technology now, your emails on the phone, your text messages, phone conversations, conference calls, FaceTime.
You can communicate in so many ways, right?
Exactly.
So being a dad, putting your family first, I do have to ask, because you've worked with a lot of artists that talk about a lot of different things. So drugs and the different things that artists say they rely on or talk about in their music. What are your thoughts on that, especially not just in the music, but for the culture of hip-hop and trap music?
Well, one fortunate thing is I don't use drugs. I barely drink.
Okay.
I think my son maybe saw me drink a beer once in his lifetime.
Oh, wow.
And he's 7 years old now. My daughter's 17. She thinks I'm a square because, he's like, man, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's, it's a choice that I made life-wise. And to be an example to my children,
Yeah.
Not to do those things. I've seen so many people in my lifetime, be affected by it. So there is a sense of responsibility to it, on the artist side. I give a prime example. If you look at Little John now, he's matured so much, over time. I think, when you're young, like seeing the guys like Earth Gang, I remember starting to work with them, I was like, man, y'all kind of hardcore with it, whatever it is that they're doing, their vices. But I realized that's youth culture. Like a lot of kids actually experiment with different things, even with their music, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, Organized Noise, if you look at part of the documentary, we addressed those things in the documentary. Like, but they outgrew it and outlasted it. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
But, and I give you a prime example with the Dungeon Family. We're probably one of the only crews that everybody's still alive.
Yeah.
And thriving. Now, if you go to all those hip hop crews from back in the early 90s, somebody's passed, knock on wood, thank God for that.
Right.
But, drug overdoses, alcoholism, prison, whatnot, and I think that's the integrity to the leader that we had in Rico, being able to, set a standard for everyone. Same thing with John and that BME crew. There was a standard set by the leader to show everyone, take responsibility for what you do and don't do it in excess. I'm not going to be your father and tell you don't do it at all. But if you do it, take responsibility for it and, be a man about it. So I took that in the same respects myself. My career path has been in so many different areas, I consider myself a teacher, so to speak, as well. Every assistant I've ever had has a job in the music industry now.
Yeah.
They're all executives somewhere. So, it's about teaching them those same values that I was taught by other individuals. I have no
Dope.
problem handing out my relationships to, the people that worked for me and helping them, transition into a life of, of an executive.
That's what's up. I appreciate that for sure. So, speaking of the countless hours that you've put into giving back to the culture, like I said before, you have helped in showing the world in the music that we love, that everybody might not have seen had it not been for some of the things that you did. Do you feel that you get the love back?
Definitely
And
not.
what?
One thing and I've never actually chased after it.
Yeah.
Something like this, I don't do often.
Yeah.
I like to be able to walk through the grocery store and, with my kids and enjoy it and listen to people on the phone talk about projects I've worked on.
Yeah.
And things that have happened. I've sat in a room before with people that talked about things that I'd, worked on or been a part of. They didn't even know it was me.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I'm not sure I'm sure you guys are familiar with Noonie.
Mm-hmm.
We knew each other and spoke on the phone and email for maybe 5-6 years. Had been in the same rooms together.
Yeah.
But he did not know what I looked like.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I enjoyed that though,
Yeah.
and there were several people that way, like, man, we had no idea
That was you.
that was you. I mean, Khaled, the first time he actually met me and put my name along with my face, like, so you're like a ghost. Like, I was like, man, I just don't like the notoriety.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an Instagram, I have social media pages, but, I don't necessarily post myself with these, all the artists that I've worked with. So I can't necessarily, I don't get the accolades. It's so many people that take credit for the early successes of Future's career. It's ridiculous. I've heard so many stories like, wow, you weren't around. You didn't go through that. You weren't in that argument. You weren't in that, come
That's
on.
true.
You weren't around. Same thing with what's going on with Organized now. So many people take credit for what's going on. And I'm like, wow, that's something else.
Yeah.
But, I'm not into it for that. It's more so, I like money. I think we all do.
Yes.
And, I'd like to be able to enjoy my life.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that kind of helps you keep that work-life balance too, and, spend time with your kids without being bombarded.
Exactly.
So you sustained a great deal of success over the years, like I mentioned before. Well, I guess why do you think that is? And also, why do you think you're the man for the job with 72 Music Group? All the things that you do in terms of management and A&R. Why do you think you're the guy for the job?
Perseverance. One thing I learned early on and what made me stand out was I never let anyone work harder than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't the most talented person, I'll be honest. I can't listen to a record right away and know that that's a hit record. That's a talent that I don't necessarily have.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll take the time out to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't, they get frustrated in that respect. And not being a Hollywood, A&R guy, a Hollywood manager that, standing there in every picture with the artist and taking credit for certain things. It's not something that I profess to do. So, I tell anyone, man, outwork the next man and you'll stand out. And that's basically what happened with me. There was a pool of interns. There were a pool of people that worked at all the different companies that I worked at and, been around. But, that's one thing that I've always been able to do. And the people that I do business with will always tell you that, man, Orlando's a really hard worker. He'll be there.
That's what's up. I definitely think it's obvious that you have a great work ethic. What would you suggest to young people that are listening that are interested in doing what you've done or what you do now, in management and A&R?
Don't look for instant gratitude and be ethically just. There's a lot of, especially in Atlanta now. I mean, even if an artist comes to you and tells you, man, I'll sign anything. Don't have them do it. They do it to me right now. I just want a shot. I'll sign all my publishing over to you. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't even think about that.
Yeah.
I've even helped artists, and producers get out of deals. There was one that was really close to me. He ended up in a deal, and I was like, man, I'm not going to let you, live through this.
Yeah.
So I made a couple phone calls, and we fixed it,
Wow.
So,
That's terrible.
That's a big, big deal.
Yeah.
Because that's what, keeps beef going as well. We know once you put up certain things, then yeah, you're entitled to it. And I actually advocate for the boutique labels.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love what Coach K is doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
because he's been through all of those wars and he's been through successes and failures, he knows what to look out for.
Yeah.
So I would advocate for an artist to go sign with that particular company to go into a major record label. I don't see why you would actually not, know, take that knowledge and expertise that someone has, and what Jason Jeter and Chaka are doing with their new company with Culture Republic. Why would you not go sign with that company and, cherish the moments that you have learning from those guys?
Yeah.
Because it seems like everyone wants to become Baby all of a sudden. Everyone wants Cash Money. They don't realize Cash Money was an independent record label before they went into the major label system. Yeah. And they still took their bumps and bruises.
Right.
So, walking into that cesspool of, politics and budgets and, whatnot, a lot of these young guys are going to get eaten up.
That's true. What today are you excited about that you're working on, that you want to tell people, like, this is what to expect? 72 Music Groups is what we got going on.
Well, from the documentary, a couple of other film opportunities have kind of come up. We actually won Music Fest with Jay Carter.
Yes.
I was instrumental in putting that together. So what we did with the crew, we filmed it.
Yes.
We filmed the rehearsals.
I think Motown mentioned it too.
Yeah, we the rehearsals to all the meetings that led up to it. So we're gonna put out a concert piece from that particular show.
Nice.
With the whole, that's probably one of the last times you'll ever see the entire Dungeon family perform on stage together.
Right.
And I think it brought the guys back together camaraderie wise. I think they talk to each other almost every day now.
Yeah.
So about kids and just life in general. And again, a couple other projects on the film side, TV side. I can't talk about now. They're in development. But also, Jaron Benton. There's a kid named Caleb Brown out of Baton Rouge that we just took on as a client, and Justice League, and a couple of the things that we're doing with Justice League. And what I did with Earth Gang and bringing them to the forefront, putting them on tour with Absol, and getting them going. They just entered into a deal with a record label. And just being out here for the young guys. Reach out.
Appreciate you.
The advice. I'm here. I've experienced a lot, like I said, ups and downs, and I work real closely with Big Oomps youth football program over at Ben Hill, William Walker Recreation Center,
formerly Ben Hill.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's up. I appreciate. I think we appreciate you, young people. Appreciate what you're doing to give that wisdom back, and especially being on this podcast, because like I said, most of these guys that come on here, including yourself, don't do this often, so we don't always get that knowledge back, but it's good to educate. So where can they actually find you on social media if you do want to be found there?
My Instagram is O Mcghee, and my Twitter is O Mcghee, OMCGHEE.
Dope. Awesome. And thank you again. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
And as always, you guys can find me at Sammy Approved. And thank y'all for listening to the podcast.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Sonically superior.